Okay. Now we'll just wait for people to show up, and we'll get started. Alright, here we go. So today we're gonna do cheddar soup. It's actually a really easy recipe, and it was supposed to be cheddar and broccoli soup, but I just got back from the grocery store and totally blanked on getting broccoli. So I will explain at what step you would add the broccoli. Hint, it's at the very end. But I don't actually have the broccoli, so you won't be seeing that in the finished product because I am dumb. Okay. So, let's start with our ingredient list, as always. So, you will need anywhere from 2 to 4 cups of cheese. I like to do a mix of sharp and mild cheddar. Now, normal recipe is 2 cups. But I like mine particularly cheesy, so I will go anywhere from 3 to 4, depending on how much evaporation I got off on the chicken broth, and you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. You will also need a couple of celery sticks, a couple of carrots, and an onion for your Mary Pois. If you were here for the chicken pot pie recipe, then you will remember that your Mary Pois is a combination of celery, carrots, and onion. Now, because it's late tonight and I have 1,000 things to be doing, I'm cheating, and I got the mix. So this is Mary Pois. It's just, like I mentioned in the chicken pot pie recipe, if you want to spend a couple extra bucks, like $2 extra, and save yourself some time, you can get it already cut up for you, and it's just the correct ratio of celery, carrots, and onions. There's no harm in doing it yourself, and I do recommend people do it themselves to get a feel for it. But I'm in a bit of a rush today, so we're going to cheat a little bit. You will need 6 tablespoons of salted butter, which is just normal run-of-the-mill butter. It's almost a whole stick. You will need 1/2 pint of heavy whipping cream. If you're looking to cut down the fat content, the calorie content of this particular recipe, you can substitute the heavy whipping cream out and sub in anything 2% or more milk. Don't try to go down to 1% or skim milk. It will break apart. It doesn't have enough fat content to stay together at the heat with which the soup cooks, and it will break apart on you, and it'll just be kind of gross. I like to do it with heavy whipping cream because it adds a lot of rich cream flavor to it, but again, it is also heavy whipping cream, so that's why I'm probably staring down the barrel of a massive heart attack by the time I'm 45. Last but not least, you will need 1 quart of chicken broth. If you make your own chicken stock, you can absolutely do it with that, and it comes out awesome. Though these demos are primarily for my friends who say they don't know how to cook, so I'm willing to bet that you don't have homemade chicken stock, if that's the case. Though at some point I will do a demo on how to make chicken stock, because it's super easy. But yeah, so that's it. One last run through. So again, 3 to 4 cups of cheese, pre-shredded. It makes your life easier, though you can get it in a block and shred it yourself. A couple of celery sticks, a couple of carrots, and 1 small onion, or conversely, the pre-cut mix. 6 tablespoons of salted butter, 1/2 pint heavy whipping cream, and a quart of chicken broth. So we will start. We will start by taking a full-sized Dutch oven or pot. Doesn't need to be a super like 16-quarter, but you need to be big enough for all of your ingredients. This is more than enough. You're going to put this on medium heat. And you're going to just add all of your butter right to it. Your girlfriend is lactose intolerant. This is cheese soup. I do not know. I have never looked into doing this recipe with vegan substitutions. I mean, it's cheese soup. I will look into it. I will try to send a response. I'm trying to be as interactive with these videos as possible. Oh, speaking of which, I tagged this video as public, so if everybody who's watching would be ever so kind as to just share the video so I can get as much coverage as possible, that'd be great. Okay, so you're going to take your spatula and you're going to keep that butter moving around because at medium heat it's going to want to brown on you, and you don't really want it to brown. So I'm going to actually turn it down to low-medium. Just because I don't want it to brown, and we're going to keep that butter moving around until it's about halfway completely melted. I think Facebook would probably take some offense to me doing my cooking shows nude. Something tells me that is a really good way to get myself kicked off of Facebook. So once we get that butter going, you're going to take your carrots, onions, and celery. Now, if you're cutting these yourself, I'm going to show you the size that you want to cut them to. You want it for a soup like this, you want to get it down to a small chop. Not quite a dice. I like the added texture of having the pieces a little bit more whole. Some people like their soups thinner, so you can always go down to a dice or a mince. Depends on how comfortable you are with the knife and how you like your textures. I like my soups to kind of have something to chew. Like, I like there to be a texture to it, so I leave my vegetables. Actually, when I'm cutting them myself, I actually go a little bit larger than this, but that's okay because it's really doesn't make a difference. It's all in preference. So feel free to experiment and see what you like. So this is all just going to go literally right in the pot. So I'm going to crank that heat back up to medium now because we got the butter pretty much melted. And our goal here, just like with the chicken pot pie, our goal here is to soften and cook the vegetables a little bit, but we do not want them to brown. So the reason we don't want them to brown is that starts the caramelization process, and it's going to royally change the flavor on these vegetables. And it's not really compatible with the soup. With the cream products that are going to go in for the soup. Now, it's great if you're doing like a roasted you're trying to do roasted vegetables as a side dish for like steak or chicken or something, but it's not really appropriate for soup. So again, we have these on medium heat now. And again, you're just going to keep everything moving for about 5 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll start a timer. Not that I really need a timer for this, but just for the sake of keeping everything consistent for those of you watching at home. Okay, I'm going to set this down. I'm going to turn the camera around. Good. Alright, this is an excellent time for any cooking questions that anybody has. We got 5 minutes to kill, so hit me with your cooking questions. They don't have to be about this recipe. Go ahead and hit me. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here stirring this pot while I wait for the timer to go off. Now, fun fact about this recipe: when I make this recipe for all the nerds at Alliance, I make it also not just with the broccoli, but also with bacon as well. And what you do is you take about 4 or 5 strips of bacon, maybe about 1/4 to 1/2 pound. You get it good and crispy, and then you cut it. You crumple it up on your cutting board. You can either use a knife or your hands once it cools, and you add that as towards the end, and it gives you that nice cheesy bacon flavor for the soup. You don't want to use a whole pound of bacon because the bacon flavor will completely overpower the soup, and you won't be able to taste anything else. So we got some questions rolling in. Do you prefer to use that vegetable mix for most soups? Yes. Pretty much. The only thing that is different about that is if a soup has a longer cook time, I might use potatoes instead. But the thing about like beef stew, for example, beef stew I will do with potatoes because that has a much longer cook time. The thing about adding potatoes to any soup is, as awesome as they are in most stews and soups, potatoes take a fuck ton of time to cook, comparatively. So like these vegetables will be softened and mostly cooked to where we want them to be in 5 minutes. Potatoes take 20, 30, 40 minutes, depending on how big that they were cut when they go in. So they're much better for stews or slow cooker recipes than a straight stovetop soup. There is, and that's something I should probably bring up, there is a difference, culinarily speaking, between a soup and a stew. A stew is a much longer cook time, much lower heat type of recipe. So that's like your beef stews. A soup is generally on a higher heat, and it's just one quick preparation after another until it's ready. So that's why things like potatoes, for example, don't work. So yeah, I use mirepoix, celery, carrots, onions, for pretty much all of this stuff. The only thing that is substituted out is sometimes instead of doing the carrots, I will do bell peppers because I absolutely love bell peppers. So that is absolutely a perfectly good substitution, and that converts your mirepoix from a French mirepoix to a Creole mirepoix if you switch out the carrots and go with bell peppers instead, which is an awesome way. Since I'm doing this recipe for everyone who's like, I'm just doing it like kind of the direct classical way. I didn't feel like cutting vegetables tonight, so I bought the mix, and the mix is the French version. Okay. Could you turn it into a spicy or nacho cheese soup? Absolutely. That's literally the only thing that you're doing different there, using different cheese. I like cheddar, so we're doing cheddar, but if I substituted that out and went with like a Monty Jack mix or a pepper jack, you'd get a nice spice note there. Also, at this phase with the vegetables, I could have cut up a jalapeno and thrown that in there, and that would have given it, with the mirepoix, and let that break down, and that would have added a real nice kick to something like this. So like one whole jalapeno diced up and thrown in here would have definitely given us that spicy nacho flavor. Thoughts on ceramic versus metal pans? Ceramics are awesome if you A, have money, and B, are meticulous about taking care of them. Ceramics are great, but they scratch real easy, and if you scratch them, they are fucked. The coating on them is just done. They'll corrode through the layers, and they're just screwed. They're awesome in terms of heat distribution. They're some of the best things you can buy, but you have to take really good care of them, and they're expensive. So for people who are just starting out, you cannot beat stainless steel. It's nearly indestructible. You don't really have to worry about. You can scratch the shit out. You can burn things in it and fuck up while you're learning. You can scrub the shit out of it with a metal scrubby, and it'll just keep on kicking. So a good set of stainless steel is what I recommend for anybody who's starting out. It's not as cheap as aluminum, but it will last you forever, and even if you fuck up again and again and again. Okay, and that was our timer. And that was the end of the questions. So we will move on to the next step. So the next step is going to be our chicken broth. And you're going to add the whole quart directly into the pot. Now, an optional step. Now right now, the way I'm doing this is going to be gluten-free. Not because I'm one of those like crazy fad people who does non-gluten. I'm not. I don't give a shit. However, I do cook this recipe for up to 60 people at a time, and sometimes people can't have wheat. So I leave that out just so I have one less allergy to worry about. Now, what you could have done before adding this, before adding your chicken broth, is you sprinkle about a tablespoon's worth of flour onto the vegetables and stir that around before adding the chicken broth. And the reason you do that is with the butter that's already mixed in with the vegetables. Oh, and we're also going to bring this up to high heat now. Sorry, bring that up to high. And we want to bring this to a boil. You know, and had we added that little bit of flour in, it would mix with the butter and create a roux, which is a thickening agent. And what that would do is that would thicken the soup up. I'm omitting it because I don't care. It's another step. It doesn't really make a difference to me, and I omit it when I'm doing this in large quantities anyway. I'll tell you right now, while it affects the end consistency, if you like your soups thicker or thinner, it doesn't do anything to the flavor. It'll taste the exact same. It's just going to change the consistency. Okay. Anyone else got questions? Because I got to wait for this to come to a boil now. It won't take long, but if anyone's got a question, now's the time. Feel free to ask questions, by the way, while I'm explaining other things. I will come back to the questions once I have a moment that I'm not explaining an important step. Alright, we're just going to let that come to a boil. No questions, huh? Let me show you guys what this looks like right now. So, just for the record, it looks like this. This is just butter, carrots, celery, onion, and 1 quart of chicken broth that we're just going to bring to a boil. Serving suggestions, sides for a soup dish. Okay, good one. Classically, rolls, like hard rolls, like French bread rolls and the like, are an excellent traditional side to most soups. Soup croutons, which are like the big croutons, kind of like the same big croutons you see in a Caesar salad. Those are an excellent garnish and sort of side for soup dishes. I personally love them. Let's see, other serving side suggestions for soups. Side salads actually is pretty classic. That's where the whole soup and salad concept comes from. So like a balsamic, a light salad. You're not normally going to do like a super heavy salad with a soup. Not traditionally. But then again, food is always something that's it's really more about what you like. While there's technically a whole bunch of rules for how you're supposed to do stuff, it really comes down to what you like. So for these videos, my goal is to teach technique, but do what you like. In terms of serving suggestions, you know, when you're full, stop, or maybe even a little bit before then if you're trying to be good, because Americans are bad at portioning. Herbs that match the soup. In this particular one, the traditional recipe just calls for salt and pepper. I'm going to add a little bit of garlic powder, because I add garlic to fucking everything. Yeah, it's actually just, the recipe originally only just calls for salt and pepper. I'm going to add garlic. And then a soup like this, you could also add, you could add a little bit of dill. You could add a little bit of things in that family, like rosemary, marjoram. Go light on all of these, though. And only any one of them. I wouldn't recommend trying to load all of those flavors into something like this. You'll overpower it. And it'll taste like a juniper bush. Oh, one other ingredient I almost forgot. Because I'm an idiot. Nope, that's not it. No, hold on. I know I already have it, which is why I didn't pick it up. At least I should already have it. Uh-oh, am I out? Oh, there you are. Yes. Sorry. One last ingredient I forgot at the beginning, because I'm dumb. Ground mustard. This is the other spice that gives this its kick. You're going to use about a teaspoon of ground mustard. Alright, so we got this to a boil. We're going to drop it down to medium-low. Let the boiling stop. And this is an important step. It needs to no longer be boiling. I cannot stress this enough. Okay, good. Now, why do we want it to get it to a boil and then just tone it back? We want to get it up to temperature, but we do not want the rolling boil. And the reason is we're about to add heavy cream and cheese, which are dairy. If you boil dairy, it breaks apart and it curdles. So once you add the dairy products to any soup you're making, any cream-based soup, you cannot let it boil again. If it boils again, you have officially fucked up your recipe. So we want to get it up to a nice high temperature, that boil, and then back it off. Okay, so now, what type of cheddar? I said in the beginning, I'm doing a mix of sharp and mild, but it's entirely up to your taste. So, we're going to add our heavy whipping cream and our cheese at roughly the same time. Now what's going to happen, and I think I'm going to go with all 4 cups because I really like cheese. Yep. Now what's going to happen here is you're going to put this back to medium heat, but you're going to have to keep an eye on it because you do not want it to boil again. And we're going to actually sub out our spatula now for a whisk that I think I probably forgot to clean ahead of time. So, yep, because I'm dumb. One moment, please. Alright, clean whisk. Because I'm stupid. Alright, so now what you're going to do is you're just going to keep stirring and whisking this soup until all the cheese is melted. See, the cheese is getting there, but it's not there yet. Now, you're going to be tempted. You're going to be tempted to turn the heat up because you're like, it's not really melting. It needs to be hotter. Don't do it. Don't give in to that temptation. Do not turn the soup up higher than medium at this point. If you boil the soup, the cheese and the milk and the milk or the heavy cream will all separate and they won't recombine, and then you have curdled soup and you'll have to start over. So fight the urge. Fight it. do not raise the soup above high heat. Above medium heat. Medium. Also, you can't really see it, but when I have this whisk, I am pushing this whisk against the bottom of the pot, and I am just keeping all the elements moving because you do not want any of your vegetables and whatnot to stick to the bottom of the pot because they'll burn, and then they add a burn flavor to the soup, and that's lame. Okay, so that's thinning up nicely. Stay. Good. Okay, so now we are going to add our salt and pepper. And these are more or less to taste, though if you're looking for rough measurements because you don't feel like you have a feel for it yet, you're going to go with, I would say, a half teaspoon of each. Okay, I'm throwing in, now that's where you can stop if you want just the basic recipe, but me personally, I'm going to throw some garlic powder in. And my ground mustard, because this gives it a little kick. Okay. I'm just going to whisk all that in. So all of our cheese is pretty much melted. This soup is basically done. You can turn it down to low heat at this point, and you can cover it and let it sit for about 10 minutes on low heat if your vegetables don't feel like they're cooked enough. That's a preference thing. Me personally, it's like 10 o'clock and I've barely eaten anything today because I have a crazy patient load, so I'm going to pour myself some right now. But yeah, very simple recipe. So everyone says, I can't cook. Well, in 20 minutes, we've made an entire pot of soup. Now, things I screwed up that I said I would explain at the end. So let's say you had you wanted to make this a bacon cheddar soup. Well, this is the end. So this is where you would add that bacon. You would chop up your bacon, you throw it in. Cooked bacon, and then throw it in. Let's say it was supposed to be cheddar and broccoli, like this was supposed to be. Well, you would have your broccoli already boiled or steamed. I like to use the little microwave steam bags of broccoli because you can get the Stop & Shop brand ones, steam ready bags, on sale for $1, and it's really easy. So you would then just take that broccoli and throw it in the pot. You would cook the broccoli separate and then add it into the pot at the end. And really, anything that you like can go into a soup like this. And that's fine. It's really about what you like. So, that's it. For everyone who's on a budget, the cheese is the most expensive part of this. If you've got milk at home, you can use, again, you can use a cup of milk instead of the heavy whipping cream. A half pint and a cup are the same measurement, just so you know. You can do that. The cheese is the most expensive part, and then a quart of chicken broth, which you can get store brand fairly cheaply. So all in all, this whole recipe, start to finish, is you can do it for about 10 to 12 bucks. With getting store brand everything, and it's portion wise. I mean, this is enough. I live by myself. This is enough soup for dinner for 3 or 4 days. It's 3 or 4 good solid big servings here. If you're serving it with other things, particularly if you remember to add the broccoli, like you're not an idiot like me and you add the broccoli to make it more filling. 2 people can hang out and eat this for at least 2 dinners. So that's not bad. I mean, that's a pretty efficient use of limited resources. Okay, I'll open it up to any final questions for a minute or 2, and then if nobody's got any questions, that's pretty much it. That is the chicken soup. The cheddar soup recipe. I'm just going to clean up my kitchen, and so if you've got any questions, ask them now, because we're pretty much done. Can leftovers be frozen? Absolutely. Absolutely. Soups like this are pretty much designed for long-term storage. Oh, that reminds me of an optional step. All right, this might be a little bit more advanced than some of the people who claim they can't cook want to deal with, and I personally don't because I like the textures of my soup. One of the things you can do at this phase, now that the soup is done, you can pour the entire thing into a blender and just hit it with the blender on puree. And then pour it back into the pot and just give it a good stir with the whisk. And that's how you get that, like, that really smooth and thicker consistency that you see in, like, a restaurant version of this soup. All of those vegetables are still in that version of the soup, but what they've done is after they made the soup, they've passed it through a food processor or a blender. So that's a totally valid option. I don't know why Can It Be Frozen reminded me of that, but it did. Going on to Tracy's question about can it be frozen? Absolutely. You just pour, once it cools down a little bit, you pour it directly into a gallon freezer bag, you squeeze the air out of it, you throw that bad boy in the freezer. It will keep for up to a month, I believe. Maybe even a little bit longer in the freezer. So that's a great way to, if you make a really big batch, to break it up and store it. Any other questions? Show you what this looks like. So, funny fact, all of these fancy cooking implements that I have in my kitchen and everything, and you know what I don't own? A proper ladle. Another good add-on to something like this, if you want to thicken it up really cheaply and like turn it into several days worth of food, is you can add rice. But if you add rice, make sure you add the rice during the boil phase with the chicken stock or broth before you add the cheese or the cream, because you'll want to get that rice up to a boiling temperature. And then let it absorb all that extra moisture. And again, you do not attempt to boil the soup once the dairy products are in there, or you're gonna have a bad time. But there you have it. One bowl of soup. Alright folks, if you got any other questions, feel free to hit me up on Facebook or post to the video thread, and I'll get back to them as I see them. Alright, good night.